Well, the primaries are over and the polls are starting to gain steam. It's midterm elections. Here in the Commonwealth of Virginia and across the United States, we'll choose our next congressional representatives. Not only that, but we've got a lot of local races and also statewide. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Claville. Joining us, we'll have a political analyst to break down what's at stake and why you should vote. Stay tuned. We'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. As always, we're so glad to have you with us as we broadcast live from the campus of the Norfolk State University from the radio station of WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA, here in beautiful Hampton Roads, Virginia. Wherever you're joining us from, I know that it's beautiful there. And on this Sunday, hopefully you're starting your week off just right. As always, in the studio, we have our phenomenal producer, Marvin Folks, also known as DJ Scandalous, which you can hear on the station live every Monday through Friday from 2 to 6 p.m. Also, catch his cybersecurity tips and moments, which I enjoy tremendously. Well, listen. As always, here on Stay the Water, we like to bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community with timely topics. And what we have today is, again, it seems like it's always election time, right? But here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, it is always election time. And it's a very important time because it's your opportunity for your voice to be heard. Last month, we had primary elections for our congressional races here in the Commonwealth and also for some very important local races. And joining us, we have with us my good friend and a national political strategist, Democratic strategist, Jasper Hendricks, joining us to talk to us about why you should vote and what's at stake in this election. Jasper, so glad to have you.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. How's it going?
Phenomenal, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing good. Enjoying this view of Nashville, Tennessee. So I wish I was with you guys there in Hampton Roads, Virginia. It's been a long time, but I will get out that way soon.
Absolutely. And look, you got to come by your alma mater, the Spartan Nation, right?
Hey, yeah, absolutely. A lot has happened. And congratulations on all the great work that has happened there on campus, and keep it up. You guys are putting the university in its national platform where it has been. But I am so glad to see such the amazing work that continues to happen there.
Absolutely. And, one thing about, what's going on here is that it's all about teamwork. One thing our president always talks about is teamwork, and nobody does it by themselves, but it is a team effort to get it done. Right.
And teamwork makes the dream work, and which is actually an important way to segue into the conversation about what's happening in this election, because it is going to take, teamwork to get people out to the polls. This election cycle, I think a lot of people have become a little disillusioned prior to some of the latest Supreme Court rulings and decisions that have come down. But I also believe that it has galvanized, some of those decisions have actually also galvanized people. So it will be interesting to see if Democrats can bottle up some of this energy that they're displaying on social media and actually turn people out to vote. So that way, we can continue to see some of the progress that has been happening with, coming out of the White House.
Absolutely. Jasper, you mentioned something very important. Voters being upset and an opportunity to galvanize. Now, I want to mention to our listeners that primaries were last month in June, and they kind of go by without a blimp on the screen unless there's a contentious race. But every 2 years, our members of Congress are elected in every single state. So every member of Congress here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, including our Congressman Bobby Scott, and then, of course, neighboring Congresswoman Elaine Luria and Rob Whitman over in Virginia Beach and on the peninsula, are up for re-election. And we know that the Elaine Luria race is a high-profile race. And not only that, but we've got the mayor of Newport News, one of our great cities here in Hampton Roads, up, and a lot of local city council and school board seats. They talk about how all politics is local. Well, Jasper, it gets no more local than your school board members and also your city council persons. But what I want to start with, I want to talk about this national scene. Because we came from, we're about 18 months from I call it, an everyday emergency, a traumatic event that happened under the last presidential race. It seemed like every day there was something, provocative being said or done. And right now we got the J6 hearings that are going on. And, of course, we've got issues like the war in Russia, Ukraine. We got inflation. I don't know if you've been to the gas station lately, but I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. What's going on? So we got and then the Supreme Court. We got all these things going back and forth. As a political strategist, tell us, what's going on? What do you see?
And you know what? You're right. You bring up a great point. All 435 U.S. House seats are open, along with 34 of the 100 U.S. Senate seats, and 88 of the 99 state legislative chambers are up for grabs. And so, Virginia, you had your state elections last year, mm-hmm. but 88 of the 99 state legislative chambers are up for re-election, as well as 36 gubernatorial seats. So there's 36 states that's going to be electing a new governor, this year, as well. And so, and as you said, I know your listeners are there, in Virginia, but all over the country, this probably is one of the most, if not the most important election cycle of our lifetime, because of, the Supreme Court told us a few weeks ago that some of the decisions they couldn't make because it's up to the states. Yeah. The states have not been doing their work, which is why state elections and local elections are important. You cannot keep kicking things up to the federal level, if the states have not done their work to comply with some of the changes that need to be made within the U.S. Constitution. And so, but then also it's important to vote in local elections, is because if we do vote and change things on the federal level, it has to trickle down. And so you've seen where states where President Biden has, we have the monies that are coming in for infrastructure bills and, and money that is supposed to help people. One of the reasons why we're seeing some of this inflation, and this inflation is hurting people, is because we have states that have received the money from a Democratic administration that refuses to use it because they don't want to show that the Democratic administration is actually helping people. So, for example, out of all of the federal dollars that have come into my state, Tennessee, we now are faced with a $2 billion surplus.
Wow.
So we have this $2 billion surplus in money that is sitting in the bank that the Republicans are refusing to do anything with, but we still have the lowest unemployment insurance in the country. Our people on TANF only receive $200 a month.
What?
And they refuse to raise it, to help people buy loaves of bread or to help with, gas, to get back and forth to work. So they're just sitting on this money. And they're going on the news and saying, "Oh, our people are suffering because of the policies of the Democratic administration," when in fact they're not utilizing the money that is coming in from the Democratic administration just so that they can have talking points. So that's why it's important, to vote in every election and not just in your presidential elections, because the president can only do but so much if you have other people who are elected that are working every day against their agenda.
Again, every vote matters. And that is when we talk about states and states' rights. To me, that goes all the way back to the George Wallace days of segregation and all these individuals that ran against, the Voting Rights Act, ran against, civil rights actions and laws to equalize things in our society. I know a lot of voters, they're too young, especially those born after that time period, too young to remember that time period. But you and I, we've been in politics for a while, and we understand, the implications of states' rights. How serious is this argument now in 2022 as opposed to 1962?
It's extremely important right now because, as you said, I'm going to use the example of the Roe versus Wade conversation, right? And which the Supreme Court says, well, it needs to go back to the states. Well, when you look at certain states like New Hampshire, where you could still marry off your 13-year-old daughter, or in South Carolina, where a woman would have to get permission from her husband or ex-husband in order to sell her real estate or property that she has, and you and just look at some of the laws and going state by state and saying that the states have not taken the time to properly fix their state statutes and codes to make sure that women have their proper place in the Constitution and in laws. Because as you mentioned, a lot of these laws were written by old white men, racist white men, and they have not been changed since then. And so, but it's up to the state legislature to do it, while some of the state legislatures that are controlled by Republicans want to focus on critical race theory, something that doesn't even exist. So why would they rather focus on something like that than working to make sure that their state laws are inclusive and actually can work for women? Women, the Equal Rights Amendment has not been ratified. Virginia was the last state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment a few years ago, but then President Trump, blocked it from being published in the archives, so that way it could be in the Constitution that women do have rights. And so, so we're going to keep having these types of conversations the longer that states do not take care of their work. Now, my day-to-day, I am the executive director of the National Organization of Black Elected Legislative Women. So I have the pleasure of working with the over 360-plus Black women who are currently serving in state legislatures in over 40 states. And we currently have a project in which our members are requesting that their states audit their state statutes and codes so that we can find potentially discriminatory language against women. So then our members, the 360-plus Black women serving in over 40 state legislatures, can then go and do the work to fix these statutes and these codes to make sure that women do have their proper places in the Constitution and that some of these laws and rules are reversed.
You're listening to Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, where we're talking about the 2022 midterm election overview here on WNSB 91.1, the soul of VA, here on the campus of the Norfolk State University. Joining us here is one of our illustrious alums, Jasper Hendricks, one of our national political strategists and also commentators. Jasper, you mentioned something very important that I don't think a lot of people understand, and that's the laws that are still on the books. One thing about legislative history is that the legislative acts and the laws and the statutes that are on our books locally and also nationally, but especially locally, is really the will of the people. It's the expression of how the people feel they should be governed, how they feel their society should move in what direction. And understand that a lot of those discriminatory laws are still on the books in a lot of states. The only reason why that they're not able to be enacted upon legally is because you have the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and others that override them federally, not on the state level. So if you remove that federal protection, there's nothing really stopping those states from enacting or acting on those laws that are still on the books. You know, before the former governor left, he created a commission in order to remove discriminatory language from the statutes and the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And you'll be surprised what was in there. I mean, you mentioned the law in New Hampshire where you could marry off your 13-year-old daughter and things of that nature. I mean, it's some egregious stuff, you know, that our fellow citizens, you know, thought of to say, hey, I don't think you should do this or you should do that, you know.
You're absolutely right. Because, you know, in Tennessee, this November, the people get to vote on whether or not we want to remove the word slavery from our state constitution.
Think about that.
In 2022.
How crazy is that, right?
In 2022, right. We're having to vote on whether or not to remove the word slavery from our Constitution. And people are like, well, they can't do it. They can't use it. And that's actually, yes, they figured out a way to still use it today, you know, i.e., prisons. When people are making and people are working in the prison industrial complex, and they are allowed to pay them 15 cents an hour or 45 cents an hour, whatever it is they pay them, which is not the minimum wage, that is considered a form of slavery. And that allows them, that gives the State Department of Correction, you know, that shield to protect them, you know, from using it. And then it's wild that we're still looking at, you know, at issues like this. And like I said, some people want to focus on things that do not even exist. And they want to tell us that our history is not true history, you know, because they want us to somehow forget about the wrongs that, you know, that our people have actually had to endure since we came over here in 1619. You know, so which is why this election is important. You know, we actually are going to have to determine who's going to run our Congress. You know, people who want to work on behalf of folks and actually create equity and break down some of these systemic, you know, issues that or systemic problems that allow, you know, people to still hold certain classes or certain ethnic groups down, or do we want to hire elect a bunch of people who continuously tell us that how we feel and what we know as a people is wrong, you know, and their focus is on something else. You know, what the end result is for the Republican Party, no one knows. Right now, it's the party of Donald Trump, you know, and we see how that has shaped out, Absolutely. You know, when we looked at January 6th, when we see January 6th.
Yeah. 15 cents, 45 cents an hour, that's $6 a week, you know, or $18 a week.
That goes to the commissary. Right. That they still have to pay, you know, these absorbent prices because who owns the stuff that they're having to buy? You know, I mean, it's just wild. It's wild.
Absolutely. And we're talking $18 a week, working 40 hours a week, by the way, not a day. So, you know, I mean, it's so much to unpack, which really drives the proverbial nail in that. It's so important that we go out and vote, make our voices heard. But, you know, from your standpoint, I know a lot of times you can get voter fatigue. You can get election fatigue. You see all these negative ads coming on television within 30 days before the election, 45 days and so forth. You know, from your standpoint, what is it that you think? Well, first of all, how do you think the Dems and the Republicans are doing?
Well, I think the Democrats are in survival mode and the Republicans are still in their power mode. So the Republicans want more power. but they refuse to address the elephant in the room, literally and figuratively, and that is Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
And what he was able to do and galvanize a certain group of people who want to take America back to where it was in the 1950s and 60s. Probably, we're not really sure what they mean when they say take America back, but with Democrats and the Republicans have actually also been successful in stealing congressional seats.
Yes.
So their thing is they're going to get power no matter how. And when I say stealing congressional seats, Tennessee had 2 Democratic congressional seats. Mm-hmm. This year, they carved up the city of Nashville into 3 congressional districts. The city of Nashville is now divided into 3 congressional districts, and they're including the rural areas into each of these 3 congressional districts, enough of them to now flip. So now we only have 1 Democratic congressional seat in the entire state, and that's in the city. That's in Memphis. Because you can't, no matter how much you divide up Memphis, it's still 80% black.
Right.
So you go, it's not, so they decided they didn't touch Memphis, but they were able to slice Nashville up, and they were still, so that's 1 congressional seat that they were able to gain. All they need is 5 in order to take over the House. And so if they're doing this across the country, where they're going into some of these states where they can steal seats, that's what they're doing. Democrats, what they're trying to do is hope that people will miraculously vote Democratic because they don't like what's going on the other side. Mm-hmm. Then Democrats need to still talk to people. We have elections. Are we reaching out to people? Are we on the ground galvanizing and making sure that people are taking this energy that they have, to the polling places? Or not just the polling places, but are people talking to their families and friends about the importance of voting? We had a saying back in the day in the early, in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had a campaign called Arrive for 5. I think now that the stakes are so high, we need to come up with a campaign that says 10 to win. Bring 10 people with you and we can win this thing. And so, I think that's what it's going to take, something like that, in order for us to continue to see, the progress in which the country is going into. People talking about inflation, people are talking about the Supreme Court. I mean, the Supreme Court was an issue when President Obama was there, but guess what? Nobody wanted this black man to have another Supreme Court pick, right, including, God rest her soul, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She could have stepped aside, and allowed him to make an appointment, but she didn't. And then you saw how the Republican majority stole that other, his other Supreme Court nominee, his other Supreme Court pick, because they said they came up with an excuse. It's too close to the election, and so in order to get this back right, we have to show up and we have to make sure that President Biden has people in the U.S. Congress that are willing to work with him for the betterment of our country, to help our country, not because of their political, stances and their beliefs, in which, there's some people who are just getting elected just to block everything that he does. He's going to do, which means that the last 2 years of his term, he could be a lame duck president.
Yeah. When you have power, use it, because you never know when you're going to have it again. One of the criticisms, constructive criticisms, some of the Democratic faithful have is that, they're not as stern or more aggressive as Republicans are when they get power. You mentioned, the Republicans, quote unquote, stealing congressional seats, but in actuality, all's fair in politics, war in politics, right? What they did, they created a strategy and they stuck to it, whether you agree with it or not. But they ended up stacking the Supreme Court, through the mechanisms that were provided, and they've won the Supreme Court, and they really won the argument for legal cases, if you think about it, for the next 25 to 40 years.
Yep, they have. It has, and that's what I said. It's important. But guess what? If we have the laws, if we create a system in which, our legislative system is supposed to be, then that could be our defense mechanism against, with the Supreme Court. Luckily, there are three branches of government, and each one checks the other. And so, but if we can have two of the three branches of government, that are actually doing the good work of the people, then, we wouldn't have to rely so much on that third branch of government that is currently, like you said right now, stacked. And it's going to be stacked for the next 20 years.
Absolutely. Jasper, in our last few moments, a couple of minutes that we have, I want you to kind of give a quick overview. We took a look at what the Democrats and Republicans, how they're doing nationally, and kind of what's at stake. Can you throw out a couple of issues or kind of highlight what are some of the issues that you believe the voters are concerned about, and how do you think the elected official or the candidates can really address those?
Well, when I was at Essence Festival a couple of weeks ago talking to people...
By the way, I'm jealous you were at Essence, but go right ahead.
You said, what was that? What was that?
I'm jealous that you were at Essence without me. That's right. in my hometown backyard.
Right, yeah. A couple of weeks ago at Essence Festival, the number one conversation was about reproductive rights, was about health care for women. That was the number one conversation, that women were having, just and not on stages, but walking around on the convention floor. When we were introducing ourselves to people, the first thing people would turn back around and say, "What are y'all gonna do about this?" And I'm like, "Wow, okay, that's what woke people up, I guess." And then number two is going to be the inflation, the economy, and getting people back to work, but getting people safely back to work. It's another issue. You can say get back to work, or you can say we need to stay open, we need to remain open, but there's a way that we need to do it, and there's a responsible way that this could be done. And then also we need workforce development. Some of the jobs of before are not going to be available, now that we go into this new economy. So what are we doing to make sure that people are trained, with the skills to take on some of these new jobs that are open, until either the old ones open back up or get back up, or in case that they never come back, so that we can make sure that people can still provide for their families. So I think those are the top, issues that we've seen across the country that people are paying attention to. What are people going to do to help people safely return back to our lives?
It's all about the economy. As a raging Cajun back home would say, it's the economy, stupid. It's
right.
We're talking about James Carville. Listen, when prices are high, gas is high, it costs you $100 to fill your tank, and it costs you $5 to get a gallon of milk. Things aren't going too well for the party that's in office. But it's also more than that. As you talked about, various rights that were provided, and then of course the Supreme Court with Clarence Thomas stating that, hey, next session we should look at these other rights that the court that may not be guaranteed in the Constitution. So we shouldn't take this time that the conservatives have in power lightly, and they're not taking it lightly. So the country is in a transition. But one thing that I love about elections is an opportunity for the people to vote and to give your voice, make your voice heard. Make your voice heard to how you believe that your country, your community, and society should go. But at the end of the day, we're all Americans, right? This is our country.
Right.
And we've all put the work in. So we want to make sure that our country continues to be the best in the world. Jasper, tell us what's going on with the National Association of Black Legislative Women coming up in October.
Yeah, so the Nobel Women, we'll be having our conference at the MGM National Harbor. So we're going to have over 200 Black women state legislators there, and a few of our friends, and where we're going to talk about policy issues around health equity, telecommunications, social justice issues, but then also have a leadership development component to it as well.
Absolutely.
So that way, the main objective is to grow the number of Black women who are serving in state legislative bodies.
Jasper.
Because as we know, black women fix things, black women get the work done, and in order for us to actually see the work on the ground, we have to elect more black women into our state legislative bodies.
All right, and we'll have more later. This has been Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Joining us next is my sister, Blair Durner, for Black Brands, a new show about financial empowerment. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next week. God bless.